Well, let me begin with some introductions tonight that will kind of give you a little bit of an idea who's involved in this endeavor. This is our second Prospective Partners meeting. We call them Prospective Partners meetings, as you'll hear tonight, because we're looking for partners. We're not just merely looking for parents who want to drop their kids off at school and let us do everything. And also, we're looking for people maybe who are grandparents or donors or volunteers. So there are a host of roles that we are looking to fill here at Legacy Academy. And so that's why we call it a partners meeting. But let's introduce our team to you tonight. First of all, we have Karen Barbaro. Some of you, or many of you, probably know Karen. Karen, over here, if she'd raise her hand. She is a parent teacher who is passionate about classical Christian education. She is taught in a classical Christian school and currently homeschools her 3 children classically while directing a classical Christian homeschool co-op in the area. Her husband, Jeremy, is one of the pastors at Calvary Baptist Church in Georgetown. Karen will serve Legacy Academy as head of school. Jeremy and Jennifer McIntyre. Jeremy's seated here and Jennifer standing in the back. They have 3 adult children, all of whom were educated classically, and 1 granddaughter. Jeremy is an adult education administrator, adjunct professor, serves as a deacon with their local church, and formerly served on the board of a classical school. Jennifer has 2 decades of teaching experience, including teaching for 2 classical schools, and is the owner-operator of Bayside Gymnastics in Milford. Greg and Sue Loudon are the parents of 4 adult children. Greg and Sue, want to raise your hands? All right. Greg and Sue are the parents of 4 adult children and grandparents of 14 grandchildren. Greg is a retired financial advisor and former school board member. He now serves on the board of Legacy Academy, helping to oversee financial matters. Susan has a master's degree in special ed. She helped raise 4 children to maturity and has experienced the best and worst of public, private, and Christian education, including homeschooling. She and Greg were part of an early group of families who established a Christian K-12 school in Morgantown, West Virginia. Susan also taught most subjects during a 10-year career at that school. Brooke Loudon, their daughter-in-law. Brooke and her husband John have lived in Sussex County for 18 years. They have 5 children and have been homeschooling for 6 years. Brooke has been involved with Classical Conversations, where she started the Lewis community and directed it for 3 years. She is passionate about classical Christian education and is excited to help bring a classical school option to the area so more families can benefit from classical education. My name is Dwayne Smith, and my wife Jennifer is in the lobby there, probably texting our daughter at the moment and corralling the other one. We are the parents of 2 adult children, one who's just recently married, and then an 18-year-old who graduates this month. And I've been a pastor for 21 years, pastor here for 18 years. Myself and my wife planted Sussex County Bible Church 18 years ago with a core group of believers. From 2004 to 2006, I taught Bible, history, and English at Eagles Nest Christian School in Milton, Delaware, which is now Delmarva Christian School there in Milton. In addition to pastoring, Jen and I are foster parents, and I also have the privilege of serving, in addition to the board of Legacy, I serve on the board of Servant Leaders International, a mission whose mission is to mobilize church leaders around the world. So that's a little bit about us. So how did we get to this point? How did we get to Legacy Academy? Well, for me, that was several years ago. My youngest daughter, who is now 18, in 2015, she attended Geneva Academy in Lincoln, Delaware. And unfortunately, that was the last year of Geneva Academy. They closed down that year. But that one year really inspired me to learn more about classical Christian education. I hadn't really heard of the model, wasn't familiar with it. And so I began to read, began to investigate it a little more, and I became convinced that this model is the model. It is superior to anything going on, and it's especially superior to the progressive model that you find in the public school system today. And so as I read about it, I began praying about this, and the Lord was burdening me, and I kept thinking, we really need a school like this, a classical Christian school in southern Delaware. In Jesus' Great Commission, Matthew 28, he says, go into all the world and make disciples, right? Baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey all that I have commanded you. Sometimes we read that passage of Scripture and we skip over one important word. He doesn't say, teach them what I've commanded you. He says, teach them to obey what I have commanded you. Teaching information is different than transferring a life. Those are two different things. And one of the things I love about classical education is it's this root desire to transfer a life, a way of thinking. And that is critically important for young people. We can fill our children with facts, but if they don't know what to do with those facts, if they don't know what to do with that information, it doesn't really help them that much. Ultimately, they're going to go, many of them, even if you send them to a traditional Christian school, there's a probability they'll end up in a secular university, and you can be sure they're going to teach them what to do with all of those facts. And ultimately, what they're going to teach them is going to be most likely very much opposed to what you have been teaching them if you are raising them in a Christian home. One of the tragedies of the West is that we have, especially over the past 200 years, we have separated education from God. Those two things have been separated. We've been told a lie for many years that those two things don't go together. Keep God out of school. Several generations of people in this country have been taught the facts about God's world. Even those facts are iffy at times, depending on the school you're in. But they've been taught facts about God's world while also being taught to hate the God of that world. And so we have young people graduating from high school who are not only uneducated in the truths of this world, they are uneducated in the truths of God. You know, God's word tells us that the fear of the Lord is the what? Beginning of wisdom. That's where education starts. Education starts with the fear of the Lord. And that's one of the things I love about classical Christian education is it teaches children that the way that it teaches them how to, not only about how to live in God's world, but it introduces them to the God of this world and how to have a relationship with him through Jesus Christ. Another thing that's, I think, so important, you know, Christians, there's a lot of debate. I'll be talking about this tomorrow morning. We're beginning a new sermon series here on how to engage a secular culture, a post-Christian world. And one of the mindsets today is kind of like build bunkers, get the kids, bury the buses, as they used to say. We need to get out of the world and hide from the world, but that's not a Christian perspective. Imagine if the early believers in Acts did that. You and I wouldn't probably be here today. All of us in this room, if you're a Christian, can trace your lineage, and someday maybe in heaven you'll be able to do that. You'll be able to trace your genealogical record all the way back to one of those 12 apostles, most likely. What would have happened had they built bunkers and hid from the world? They engaged the world. They were brave. They knew what they believed, and they were not intimidated. And that's one of the things that's great about classical Christian education. It equips children to not fear the atheist, to not fear the secularist, but to realize that, no, God's word has answers to these questions. And many of these questions that are being asked today are age-old questions. They're not new. And the Bible has answered them for thousands of years. And so we want to teach children that. We want to communicate to children that God's word has the answers, that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Several years ago, I had an opportunity to sit down with a well-respected church historian. Some of you may know him. His name is Carl Trueman. He was at that time was a professor of church history at Westminster Theological Seminary. Now he's at Grove City College. He's a professor there teaching undergrads. And myself and a group of pastors in the area had a chance to sit down with him, and we were just talking about the state of affairs in the church today, and you know, as pastors do, bemoaning how bad things have become. And one of the things that he challenged us to do as pastors of churches is, instead of coming up with like a 5-year strategic plan or a 10-year strategic plan, sit down and talk about what's going to be here in 100 years if we continue on the trajectory that we are on right now. Think beyond your life. Think beyond your span of years to what you're going to leave, hence the name Legacy Academy. One of the things that has really stuck with me since my exposure to classical education was that idea that whatever we do, we don't want to do it just for ourselves. And myself, my youngest is graduating this month. My kids will never have the privilege to walk through Legacy Academy. I wish they would have had that opportunity, but it's not for them. Maybe my grandkids someday, who knows, maybe, if my children stay around here. But ultimately, I'm not doing this for me and for my family. I'm doing this for the families of Sussex County, for the families of this church and other churches, parents who want an option that is not the progressive secular model of the public school system, and that is not kind of a hybrid secular progressive model with some Christian verses sprinkled on top Christian school version, but they want something that is going to teach their children the truths, to equip them to engage the world. We want this school to be a school where scholarship is valued, where children, the reputation, let's be honest, over the years, many years, has been Christian school education is subpar to public school education. That will not be the case at Legacy Academy. And so again, I'm a part of this mission because I want to leave a legacy, to create something, to be a part of creating something to entrust to those who will come after me. We can sit around and watch cable news, we can scroll through social media, and we can complain about the state of things, or we can do something about it. That's why this is a partners meeting. We're looking for people to partner. We're looking for people to take on Legacy Academy as a mission, not to be consumers of what we're offering, but to join with us to do something about the state of things and to bring the gospel ultimately of Jesus Christ to our young people. So it's my hope and prayer that by the end of this evening and this meeting, you will catch a vision for Legacy Academy and that you will join us, again, not merely as a consumer, but as a mission partner, and that you will do the work necessary side by side with us to leave a legacy for Southern Delaware. I'm going to ask Karen to come, and Karen is going to share with you the details of Legacy Academy and give you some more specifics. There's the clicker there.
Thank you. Did everyone get an information packet? Wonderful. You can refer to that as I talk. Basically, the way we arranged it, the left side would be kind of generic information about classical Christian education as a model, and the right side would be specific to Legacy Academy, and that will guide my discussion as well. I kind of want to give you an overview of what exactly Dwayne was talking about. What is classical Christian education? What does that mean, and how is it different? And then we'll look specifically at how we are planning to do that at Legacy Academy here in Sussex County, Delaware, beginning this fall, Lord willing. So I wanted to start with this quote by Dr. Christopher Perrin. Education is the vast undertaking of passing on the wisdom and knowledge of one generation to another. Again, it's not just about a body of knowledge and information. There's so much more than that. And choosing just one word to embody that was hard for our core team, but legacy was the closest we could get. We want to pass on to our children so much more than information. We're transferring knowledge and wisdom and culture. That's what we want for the students of Legacy Academy. And those that are looking to partner with us, that's what we're asking of you. Come alongside and help us pass on Christ and his kingdom to this next generation. We have no idea what God is going to do with our kids, but I want them to be prepared. I want them to be ready. I want them to be passionate about God and his world from their time at Legacy Academy. So as far as a definition, hang on, because if you know anything about classical Christian education, it can tend to be verbose. We're really passionate about what we believe, and many books have been written about it, so even the definition will take up a whole slide. I'll try to break it down for you. Classical education is a return to the ancient goal of education. This is not new, though especially in America, there's a revitalization happening right now, but we're talking about classic in the sense of ancient Greek and Roman. So we're trying to go back as we move forward. But the goal would be to teach students to think and to learn for themselves by giving them the tools of learning. So we can't possibly teach them everything they need to know, but we want to teach them how to learn and how to think for themselves, to equip them again for whatever God will call them to in the future. We'll talk more about those specific tools of learning in just a second. This classical approach to education is rooted, again, looking back, in the medieval construct of the liberal arts. Again, I know, big words, lots of words. So let's break that down with a very simple math problem. 3 + 4 equals? Good. See, you're all ready to enroll in Legacy Academy. I use that as an illustration because when we talk about the liberal arts, there are 7 of them, and they're broken down into a group of 3 and a group of 4. So if you can kind of wrap your brain around that simple math problem, it would help you to just whet your appetite, the tip of the iceberg as far as what classical education is. That group of 3 is known as the trivium, a Latin word meaning the 3 ways. And that refers to grammar and logic and rhetoric. Together, those are what's considered the language arts. Now, this gets tricky because depending on who you talk to, who you read, many people have different definitions for grammar and logic and rhetoric. So I'll try to give you them in a nutshell. We can talk about grammar and logic and rhetoric as actual classes that in a classical school are predominant. So a grammar class, probably, I'm assuming most of you had at one time or another, what is a noun, what is a verb, classifying, maybe diagramming. Anybody? I love it. Diagramming. So that's a grammar class that you would have taken, understanding just the basic building blocks of our English language. Logic is a class in and of itself, teaching you how to think and how to argue. A lot of times you start what seemingly is backwards. You teach them the fallacies, the incorrect way to argue, and then you build into syllogisms. And again, that can be a class. And then rhetoric can be a class, like a public speaking class on how to articulate yourself effectively. But when you're talking about the trivium, those 3 steps are much more than just standalone classes. When we're looking at classical education, most people view grammar, logic, and rhetoric as a stage of development. Okay? Now, it breaks down a little bit, but think for grammar, elementary equivalent. And for logic, think middle school equivalent. And for rhetoric, think high school equivalent. But even that, you lose a lot because in the grammar stage, in a classical education, you're teaching to the child's natural aptitude and ability. So those of you that have littles, think about them. In that grammar stage, they love to ask questions, right? They're just curious about the world and they want to know everything. And probably at times you're like, I don't know, just stop asking. But they're hungry, they're little sponges, they just soak up information. So with a classical model, we embrace that. That's how God made them. Even on our worst days when it's kind of annoying to answer all those questions, that's God-given. And so in this grammar stage in those young years, we want to fill their heads with information because they're hungry for it and they can soak it all up, and that can be a beautiful thing. During this stage, a lot of them love chants and songs and rhymes. Think how you learned your ABCs and how many times you've heard Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star and things like that. Again, it's God-given, so we want to teach to that natural aptitude. But when they start to grow out of that, they come into this new stage, which is where I'm at for the first time, this logic middle school stage, and it rocks our world, right? Before we used to just tell them, God made the sky blue, and they're like, oh, okay, great, and they move on to something else. In logic stage, what's the question they ask? Why? And they're never satisfied with your why answers, and again, I have a 13-year-old, so I'm in the thick of it right now. As frustrating as that can be, that is God-given. That desire to question and connect dots and not just accept information because you as an authority gave it to them. That's not bad. That's actually a beautiful God-given thing. And so as teachers of that logic stage, we want to capitalize on that and encourage them to argue correctly, while respecting authority biblically, but we give them those tools because that's how God has made their brains to function, and that's how God has made their hearts. And so we're teaching to that stage, recognizing the God-given aptitude. And then rhetoric, those high school years are very much characterized by, I know the facts, and I think I'm starting to connect all of the dots, but I really at that stage care a lot about my appearance, how people perceive me, okay? When you get to high school, right, it's all about the peer pressure and the fitting in and the, what am I going to be known for? It's, as a piano teacher, it's not really cool, right, to keep taking piano lessons and you hit high school, but that also is God-given as they're finding their place in the world. So we teach them how to defend themselves, how to apologize for their faith and for all that they've been taught. They've been given this body of knowledge. They've seen how it fits together. And now in the rhetoric stage, they need to defend that. And it can be a beautiful thing. So the trivium isn't just those 3 classes, but it's 3 stages according to a child's natural aptitude and development. So I know that's a lot of information, but it really is key in what a classical school is and how it's different and what we're trying to accomplish. It all kind of hinges on the fact that we're looking to educate the children according to their natural God-given aptitude, okay? And then you do have that group of four is called the quadrivium, the four ways: geometry, astronomy, music, and arithmetic. These are your mathematical arts. The tricky part here is what we define as astronomy today is not, according to ancient, what they would have, and music and arithmetic, a lot of the same things. But all of these 7 liberal arts together, when done collectively and cohesively, produce a well-educated, a liberal, a free man. Okay, they are free to go out and again do what God has called them to do because they've been well educated and well equipped. So that would be our goal as far as a classical model. Now, if you look at our logo, Legacy isn't just a classical school. Okay, there's a lot more to it than that, as Dwayne was referencing. We're a classical Christian school. It happens to just roll off the tongue better to put classical and then Christian, but if you look at our mission statement, we intentionally reverse that word order. We are a Christ-centered classical school. I want us to be Christian first and foremost, and then we do believe very strongly that this classical model is the best way to follow. But man, our goal is to make disciples. You'll see that in our mission statement, and we'll talk about it in a second. So when it comes to Christian education, with the classical component, a couple questions to ask. We want these kids to know how to think. And again, that's going back to the liberal arts education, but it doesn't stop there. We want them to know and what to do with that information, to internalize it, and for it really to change who they are based on the information. And then how to live. Because of what they know and it's affected their heart, it should change how they interact with one another, the citizens that they are in their community, the family members, the coworkers, the employers or employees, all of that. It should make a difference. What they know, what they believe, it should affect how they live. And then ultimately, it should really make a difference what they love. And this is the ancient idea of piety. But maybe a better way to summarize it would be these 4 words: wonder, wisdom, work, and worship. And you can almost think of it as this beautiful spiral. But let's start at wonder with those young kids, right? They're curious. They just love the world. And they're going to stop in the middle of a sidewalk to look at a little caterpillar, right, that we would pass on by. But they're wondering at it. They're curious. They're excited. So we're teaching them how to think about that caterpillar. Let's talk about the life cycle of a caterpillar and teach them all the stages. Okay, but it doesn't stop there. That should lead to wisdom. You know what? We as human beings also go through different stages, don't we? And God changes us and makes us into a new creature. And then how to live because of what we know. Are we allowing God to change us and remake us from the inside out? And then at the end of the day, man, I love God because He has made me into a new creature, and I am worshiping and praising Him, not just for the caterpillar, though I should, but because God made that caterpillar and God made me and God loves me. But then it starts all over again, and that's just a beautiful cycle that the best way I can describe it, classical Christian education, would be those 4 words: wonder, wisdom, work, and worship. And they all fit together. And that's what we would want. We would want Legacy Academy to be a wonderful place, a school filled with wonder, where our kids love learning and they're curious and they're just excited, but wise. We want them not just to have heads filled with information. I don't want to, as C.S. Lewis said, just make them more clever devils, because they're really smart, but they don't know how to live, and they haven't submitted themselves to God's authority. We want them to have that true biblical wisdom, as Dwayne said, that starts with the fear of the Lord. We want them to be diligent workers, because this is their calling right now, and working for the glory of God. And ultimately, all of it is done in worship to our Creator, in love for Him. Now it gets tricky because I don't know about you, but I don't often love what I should. right? We're all tempted and drawn away. So that's part of our education, ordering our affections and teaching and training ourselves and the next generation to love what they should, to love what is truly good and beautiful and right. That's what we want. That, I think, is the best description I could give you of a classical Christian education. And I hope it whets your appetite for what we're trying to do at Legacy Academy. So maybe to make it a little more specific, here would be some hallmarks. If you were to walk into any classical Christian school, this is probably what you would see, what you would notice. An emphasis on formation over information. Again, it is very impressive, the amount of information that classical Christian schools pass on, but that's not the goal. We want to capture their hearts. We want to shape their loves, and that would be first and foremost. And you'll see that in our mission statement in just a second. Partnership with parents. This is definitely a hallmark of a classical Christian school. As Dwayne mentioned, we're looking for partners, not consumers. So we would expect and want and welcome parents who are very involved and committed in their child's education. I think that's a hallmark as well. Tools over content. Again, not just teaching them what to know, but how to learn it for themselves. Because the world is constantly changing, right? And we may give them a computer science class, let's say today in the fall of 2022. How relevant is that going to be in the spring of 2023? Probably not. But if we can give them the tools that they need to equip them, then they'll be able to engage that culture for Christ and learn that content. So we'll focus on the tools over the content. Integrated learning. This, again, is a very ancient concept, but it makes so much sense. Bible isn't just a class. History isn't just a class. Science isn't just a class. It is all part of God's world, and it fits together beautifully. If we take the time to notice that and make those applications, in the co-op that I'm leading this year, we are following an ancient history cycle, but we're looking at how Bible fits chronologically into ancient history, which it's fascinating when the kids are starting to see. And Kim, I think, can attest, those of us even that are teaching are like, oh my word, I'm learning this for the first time. Look how Paul was a Roman citizen and he walked on Roman roads. You have to make those connections. And then we're reading books that were written during that time period or set in that time period to further bring it to life. And then science, these ancient astronomers and mathematicians, that's what education should be. God's world is not departmentalized and segregated like that. We want our learning to be integrated. Classical languages, I have to mention this one. At any classical Christian school and at Legacy Academy, your child will learn Latin. Is that okay? And there are studies and research as to why that is. In a nutshell, Latin is the mother tongue of many of these Romance languages. So you can look at a certain percentage of our English words that come from Latin. So if we give them that foundation, we give them an appreciation for language, again, it will help them in the future for whatever God calls them. If they're going to be a missionary in a foreign country, if they're going to be a doctor or a lawyer, or if they're just going to be a mom that needs to appreciate the structure and order of language and therefore of God's world. So we start with Latin as the first foreign language, and then we would look to add beyond that. And then I want to end with delightful diligence, because you might look at all of that and think, oh my word, this school sounds intense. This school sounds rigorous. And sometimes you hear classical schools define themselves as that. In my mind, rigor is a bad word because that's the root for rigor mortis, which is what? Yeah, we don't want our school to be a place of death and dry, boring drudgery. No, we want delightful diligence. Again, the work and the wonder component fitting together. They're gonna work hard as they should because that's God's calling and we want them to be well equipped, but it's diligence. It's not rigorousness. It's a careful attention, and there should be delight, not just duty in it. And I think that can be a beautiful thing. So, in a nutshell, that's classical Christian education. Again, the very tip of the iceberg. There's so much more. And if you think that you are interested in this, I'm going to encourage you to do further reading. We've given you information to get you started. And if you ask, I have books that I can recommend. Lots of reading that I think, I know personally, it's given me an appetite for this, and I love it, and I can't get enough of it, which is probably painfully obvious right now. But what does all of that hypothetically, philosophically look like at Legacy Academy? So before we start, I want to draw your attention to our logo, because again, there was purpose and intention for what we did there. If you can see very small words at the top, respice, adpice, prospice. So those are Latin words that mean look back, look around or look at, and look ahead. So you'll see in our vision statement in a minute, that's very important for Legacy Academy. We want to give them a connection to the past. We want to give them a purpose for what they're doing now, and we want to set them up for success. God's success, faithfulness in his kingdom for the future. The cross, the crown, and the Bible are visuals that all have application to the past, the present, and the future as well. And then 2022, by God's grace, will be open this fall. So, our mission statement, in partnership with families and churches. Again, we cannot do this for you. We can't do it without you. We don't want to. We want to partner with families and churches to shape the hearts and minds of our students with a Christ-centered classical education. Hearts and minds, again, not just looking to fill their heads with facts, but really shaping their character and changing their hearts. And then the intentional reversal of the word order, a Christ-centered classical education. So when we look ahead to the future, when we think of a portrait of a graduate, what do we want to have said about Legacy Academy? We are looking to cultivate faithful men and women. That's success in God's kingdom. I'm not looking to necessarily raise up a whole generation of doctors and lawyers unless that's what God calls them to. But faithfulness is what is expected and required of all God's people. So we want them to be faithful, but specifically we want them to be enriched by the heritage of the past. We want them to know where they've come from. We want them to be engaged with diligence in the present. We want them committed to fulfilling their calling. I don't know about you, but growing up as a kid in a Christian school, I thought, man, it'll be cool when I grow up because then I'll have this calling. And I didn't even know what it was. Like, God's going to call me to something when I get bigger, when I get older. Our kids need to understand they have a calling and a purpose right now. And if it's to be a student of Legacy Academy, then we want them to do that diligently. We want them to do that well. And then ultimately, we want them to be endowed, legacy, for their calling in the future. Again, I have no idea what God's going to do with my 3 or your 4 or 5 or what God has planned for their future, but I want them to be ready. I believe it was John Calvin with his Geneva Academy in Switzerland said, "Send me your dull blocks of wood and I will send back sharpened arrows." And I love that illustration. I have no idea where God's going to shoot the arrow of your child's life. It may be right here in Sussex County, Delaware. It could be across the country or around the world, but I want them to be ready. I want them to be sharp and prepared for their future. So that's our vision when we look ahead of what we're hoping to accomplish with Legacy Academy. So to give you a snapshot, how we hope and plan and are preparing to do that in our school would be, first of all, to combine grades based on our current facility restraints and faculty. We would look to combine first and second, third and fourth, fifth and sixth, seventh and eighth. With ideally, as God blesses, we'll grow the school and we'll add a grade up through high school each year after that and ultimately look to divide those grades. But to start, again, they're in the same age and stage and development naturally, so there's a lot that's easy in combining those grades. Departmentalized instruction. I know I said learning can't be departmentalized, so it's an unfortunate word choice, but in education, this is the idea that a teacher is teaching a subject as opposed to a grade, if that makes sense. So we will hire a Bible teacher who will teach Bible to the students as opposed to each of the classroom teachers teaching Bible to their class. Does that make sense? So I understand it's a different model, but it actually can be very beautiful, because when we're looking about truly preparing them, that teacher knows all of those kids, and that teacher knows and can build on his own instruction throughout their education. And then your kids are getting the best of the best, because they're getting a Bible teacher who knows and loves Bible, and they're getting a history teacher who knows and loves history, and they're getting a math teacher. It's a beautiful thing. So that's how we plan to start initially. So if you're thinking, well, who would my child's classroom teacher be? The answer is not just one person. It would actually be a group of very qualified and passionate individuals. Our core curriculum, I mentioned Bible and history, language arts, which is very robust for us. That would include literature, grammar, composition, phonics, spelling, and handwriting, which would be cursive, just so you know. Math and science, Latin as their first foreign language, which would begin in 3rd grade, and then the specials of art, music, and gym. And then affordable tuition fees, part of what's in your packet. There is a breakdown of what it will cost, and we really have done our due diligence to keep that price as low as possible for families, because we know this is an investment and a sacrifice that you would be making to put your kids here. This would be something different from even our first Prospective Partners meeting that we held just a month ago. God is working, and God has been busy doing things, and so I'm really excited to share with you some updates. First is our hiring process. So if you were at our last meeting, what was that? The very last Saturday in March, I said at that meeting that we would be opening up to start hiring teachers within that next week. So in just 4 weeks, God has brought us 6 teachers. And I just have to praise him for that. Literally last night, we got our first signed contract back, which is encouraging. And then we have 4 to 5 more teachers that we've received applications from that we need to walk through that process. But God is bringing these people to do this here, and that's very, very encouraging. So I wanted to share that with you. We just opened up enrollment on April 15th, and we already have 9 students on paper interested in being enrolled in the school, and I know that there are more coming. That's exciting too, to see. I mean, and April 15th was only 2 weeks ago. God is, he's not bound by our time. When he makes a way, you can't stop it. And it's so encouraging and exciting to see what God is doing. And then I wanted to share with you pipeline. So hold these all tentative, but I think it gives you an idea of where our heart is and our passion and what we're pursuing. So tuition assistance for families that love our mission and vision and philosophy and know they want it for their children, but financially aren't sure that they can afford it. We're just setting up our school information systems management software, whatever it is, to be able to offer financial assistance. There's a process where families can apply for need-based financial assistance, and that's exciting, and God is bringing donors to fund that, which is not nothing. It's really exciting to see what God is doing. Scholé Days is a fun idea we have for a very restful end to our school week. On Fridays, we would open up and invite the homeschool community to join us, to partner with us for a very restful, again, end to our week, enrichment and review and just the fun stuff, but making all subjects fun, just sharing life together with the homeschool community as well. That's a possibility that we're working on. As a piano teacher, I'm really excited about the possibility of a music studio, an extension of our music program that all Legacy students will participate in, offering private voice and piano lessons after school. There's that possibility as well. And then even an aftercare program, because we know if both parents are working to afford this, your day probably doesn't end at 3:00 like ours will. So providing aftercare to keep your children safe and engaged all the way until you might be able to pick them up. So all of those are exciting possibilities. Please keep in mind they're possibilities. We're still working on all of these details, but I want to be transparent and share with you what God is doing and what he's bringing together. It's amazing. It really is amazing. And then even something as simple as in that back room right there is a copier that was donated to us completely free of charge. And I came here earlier this week to print the information that's in your handout, and I literally plugged it in and connected my computer and ran hundreds of pages, and it was a beautiful thing. But that was thanks to a donation that the school was given. Our family calls those little sticky notes, right? God's got this. He wants this school, I believe it, and he is making a way in little and big ways to accomplish his purpose. And so it's really exciting, and I want to publicly praise him for that. And I need the reminder, this is a big undertaking. We cannot do it alone. Again, we're looking for partners, but know that God is in this work. Will you be a part of it as well? Here are some needs. If you think that this is something that you're interested in, I would summarize kind of what we still need this way. Obviously, we still need families. Our enrollment is open. At this point, we don't necessarily have a cap, so we'll keep enrollment open until our building can't hold any more kids. So if you have a rising kindergarten through 8th grader, there is an admissions application in your packet, and I would be happy to talk with you more about that. We are still looking for a few more teachers. I would say kindergarten is our most pressing need. We really need that special kind of person that just loves those littles. And so if you are that person, or you know of someone that could be that person, please spread the word. We're probably looking for 1 to 2 part-time lower elementary grammar school to take on a couple of subjects, and then those blessed substitutes that we can just call on. We're going to need those kind of people who have the availability as well as the desire and the ability to just kind of fill in if and when our teachers are not available. Donors. Obviously, an endeavor like this costs money, so we will need help getting these startup costs covered, as well as filling that pool to provide scholarships for the families that need that. And then volunteers. Even starting in the next couple of weeks, it's going to take an army to transform this space into a school. And then throughout the school year, we're going to need lots of people to meet those needs. And I can't probably even articulate all that we're going to need. But if you think, I want you to know whatever you need, let me know. That would be a huge help and a blessing. So we would leave it this way. Would you prayerfully consider partnering in our legacy? I hope you have an idea of what we're trying to accomplish, what we believe God is doing through legacy in this area. We know we cannot do it alone. We don't want to do it alone. We can't, if we're striving and building in vain, if the Lord isn't doing this. But I really do believe he is. But he needs his people to step up and do his work for his kingdom. So I would encourage you to prayerfully consider partnering with us in any one of those ways. And certainly any of us that have lanyards would be happy to speak with you more if you want more information about a specific area. Certainly stay subscribed to our website, because as we announce information or release it, that will be the best way for you to stay in contact with us. I think that's it. Did we have that video that we wanted to show? It's a really good video, but it's very short. But it's a great synopsis of what classical Christian education is and what we're trying to accomplish.
The world is rated R.
And no one is checking IDs.
Do not try to make it G by imagining the shadows away.
Do not try to hide your children.
Do not try to hide your children from the world forever.
And do not try to pretend there is no danger.
Train them.
Train them.
Train them.
Train them.
Give them sharp eyes.
And bellies full of laughter.
Make them dangerous. Make them yeast.
And when they have grown,
they will pollute the shadows.
They will pollute the shadows.
They will pollute the shadows.
We will pollute the shadows.
We will pollute the shadows.
we will pollute the shadows.
Classical Christian education focused on truth, beauty, and goodness. May a virtuous childhood lead to a full life, well lived.
train them. We have to train them. That's what Legacy Academy is all about. At this time, we'll take any questions that you might have. I'm sure that I did not say everything or answer every question. So if you have any questions, we're happy to answer those at this time. You guys are an easy crowd. Yes?
Do you propose that the kids would have uniforms or?
Yes.
Just make sure you.
Oh, that's right. Repeating the question. I'm getting better. The question was, will we have uniforms for the student body? Yes. Exactly what that looks like, we haven't narrowed down yet, but absolutely. A uniform just encourages them to be physically present and engaged in their learning. And so, yeah, we want to encourage that, definitely. Good question. Yes, keep asking. That's fine. Yep.
So my concern with my children over the last few years have been the mask mandates. Out of public school a few years ago, we don't wear masks. We can't wear masks. There, you have certain stipulations, and we know that's probably going to come back. It's just constant, right? Who knows what the next pandemic is? So what if we're enrolled and that comes down the pipe, are you obligated by the state? Are you, is that something that you have talked about as far as what you would do?
Yeah, we have discussed the possibility. I hope that we all have learned from the last 2 years. Certainly know that as a board and an administrative team, we're not in favor of mask mandates. I don't see that being healthy or helpful for our students long term. But it's also really hard to say what we would do a year from now. So we're going to have to take that in faith and cross that bridge when we come to it. But we certainly would want to prioritize the learning, again, focusing on heart formation and information. That's the purpose of a school, so we would want to stay focused there. Okay. Yes?
Do you have transportation?
We do not.
Children drop off?
Correct. Yep. The question was transportation. We would need families to bring their kids here and drop them off, which I'm sorry, probably went without saying. The school is actually meeting here. Surprise. Next door, Sussex County Bible Church has an educational wing with several classrooms. That's probably where the majority of learning would happen. We'll come here and start our day together with assemblies and chapel. And then they also have facilities in the front building as well. So, yeah. You come at any point during the next school year, you would see lots of children running around here. Ideally, maybe God blesses us with more space and a facility. As God grows our school, I think we'll quickly outgrow this facility, but God has very graciously provided this to us, so we're looking to steward that well. Good. Mm-hmm.
What about art? And maybe you mentioned it, but I didn't get it. I know you're talking about music.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering how about any kind of art?
Okay, so the question was specifically about art as well as music. Both of those would be specials, so the kids would have that probably 1 to 2 times a week as opposed to every day. Again, the focus would be the past, the present, and the future. So we would look to have an art history and a music history component where they're learning the composers and the artists and the time periods, and an art appreciation and a music appreciation where they're engaging with great works of art and music. And then, as best we can, generically prepare them for the future. So I want them to be musically literate. They need to know how to read music, just like they would need to know how to read English and Latin, because I don't know what God's going to do with them, but we're all commanded as Christians to make a joyful noise and to sing psalms and hymns to one another as a means of worship and teaching. So I want them to be equipped to do that. Whether God's going to make a great artist out of them, I don't know. But we, again, want to give them those tools as well as the content to equip them for the future. So that would be the goal. In classical education, imitation precedes art. So the kids can't make art until they've studied art, which is very countercultural. And even if you look at Let me give you an example. Like writing in the lower grades, like just write a paragraph about your summer vacation. That really is a futile and almost impossible task for the kids to know how to write well. So you start by having them read good writing, and then you imitate that good writing, and then they're able to write well for themselves. It would be the same for art and music. They have to appreciate what makes good art and then practice making good art for themselves. Same thing for music. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking of maybe some like projects that go along with the lesson.
Absolutely. I could see art very nicely integrated into our other subjects as well. So as we're studying ancient Egypt or Greece, we're putting frescoes on wet plaster. Again, I think if you come during the school year and see in the halls, you'll see any number of art projects. I would see that not, again, just as a standalone class, though we're planning to offer that, but incorporated into all of their subjects as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is connected to what you're saying. I was
Mm-hmm.
just recently reading a philosopher named Charles Taylor. He coined a term called the social imaginary, and he talks about how change has come, especially in Western civilization, over the past couple of hundred years, to bring us to where we are today. He uses a term called the social imaginary, and that term refers to how ideas are transmitted to a culture. And he talks about the social imaginary being the primary way. We think it's intellectual and academic, and he said, no, it's the social imaginary, which is art, music, and anything to do with fine arts. And he talks about, our Ariana Grande today is like Salvador Dali in his time, the surrealists, and how their painting changed the sexual mores of a culture through the paintings that he and the other surrealists painted. So art is more than just teaching kids how to finger paint. It's teaching them how to understand art. I had a professor that took us to the Met, to the Frick Museum, to the Guggenheim, and he taught us this stuff, and it was like eye-opening to me to realize, holy cow, our culture has actually been influenced by this in ways I didn't even realize. And so, again, this is kind of the classical idea. You're not just teaching kids to, understand who painted what, but you're teaching them, what is art, what's it about, and then how it's influenced the culture. So.
Yes, excellent. Very good. Mm-hmm.
How about some of the other subjects? What sorts of curriculum or books would you be using for the language arts, for the math, for the sciences?
Good question. About curriculum. At this point, because we're still hiring the teachers, we haven't set our curriculum yet because I want the teachers to be involved in that process. But we're looking at, there's many classical Christian publishers, Memoria Press, Veritas Press, Classical Academic Press, that we would lean heavily on. There are some standards, Saxon Math and Shirley Grammar and things like that. But I want the teachers' input and collaboration as we set that curriculum. And then also, I think it's important to note that we would look at, first of all, lots and lots and lots of good books. Literature isn't going to be just a special once a week where they visit a library and check out Magic Tree House. So there's nothing wrong with that. Literature is a class where we're going to be reading and discussing and enriching good books together. So that's going to be part of their curriculum. And then especially with the older ones, but even all the way down to the beginning, I want them reading original sources as their textbooks. So not just reading about the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. I want the Constitution to be our curriculum. I want it to be our source. And I think that's really important, ad fontes, to go back to the source. So we'll prioritize that for sure, no matter what curriculum we're using to help us to do that. Does that answer your question? For now, I know. Yes, Jen? Yes.
So it's not just they're reading from a textbook to try to answer the questions. They understand it well themselves, and they're facilitating good conversations with these kids interviewing qualified people, and that is really what we're going to be doing at Legacy Mattress. All right,
Yes.
this person, they went to college and they got a degree, and they may know something about a surgery now, but they have a textbook and they can just read along. It's more than that.
A curriculum is just, it's a guide, it's a map, but I need the person in the classroom to use that effectively. So yes, I think it's important what books we choose, but we're really prioritizing getting the right people in the classrooms who are equipped and passionate to use those to accomplish our mission and vision. Mm-hmm. Yes. Correct. Mm-hmm. Yes, the question was about the departmentalized. So basically, probably all of you had that experience in high school, right? Your first period was science, and then you went to grammar, and then maybe shop class or something like that. We've gotten away from that in elementary school, and there's reasons for that, but we would get back to that. So yes, there would be a history classroom with a history teacher, and the kids would visit that class throughout the day. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Except for kindergarten. Kindergarten would be a self-contained classroom with a teacher because they're little and they just need that maternal presence with them, and to get them from room to room would be like herding cats. So the kindergarteners are self-contained. But I do think that brings up a good point. I don't think we give our kids enough credit. I think they're capable of a lot more. And so I've seen this model work, and you would think, oh, I don't know, a first grader, can I trust them? Yes. If we create the culture that this is what's expected and required, and we help them to enculturate that, absolutely. And again, there's beauty to it. Logistically, yep, we're gonna have to. It'll be a little bit harder to organize and arrange, but there's value there, and I wanna tap into that. Frank, did you have a question?
Actually, I have two comments.
Yes.
Number one, I am so excited you're teaching a lot. I have no idea. I had 40 years of it in high school, and it's such a difference in my life. Because our teacher had us reading original works by Latin authors, including Caesar's commentaries on the Gallic Wars.
Love it.
And Virgil's Aeneid and things like that. And she took us to operas in New York City. She took us to plays. She did Nuremberg trials. And that was a teacher who really invested in us. The other thing, which is interesting, I was thinking about, was you talk about science, is the history of science. We don't really understand how those people in the past passed on their knowledge and what they were trying to figure out to where we are today with science. And that to me is interesting. The history of science is just as important as science itself.
We're doomed to repeat history if we don't know it, right? We have to, and we stand on the shoulders of those who have come before us. So absolutely, yes. Love it. Any other questions or comments?
The children all pack their lunches. Do they have to bring their own food? Is there cooking?
That could be a pipeline project. The question was lunches. Yes, at this point, we're just planning to have everybody brown bag it. Nobody's going to die eating peanut butter and jelly. However, we do have facilities. We have kitchen facilities available. So if we have someone who's passionate about that and able to provide hot lunches, I'm not opposed to it. I do, just to be honest, want to stay focused on the academic and culture of the school. And if we can provide lunch, great, but that's not a priority. Is that okay? We will, they'll all eat lunch together is the goal. Again, to share life and school culture together. So there will probably be tables set here. So perhaps if it's I don't envision it being every day a hot lunch option, but perhaps once a week or once a month, I think we can easily do a pizza day, that kind of a thing. But they won't starve.
You already started to get to my question. Logistically, where would they eat? Where would they have gym? Those kinds of questions.
Good question. So yes, this is kind of our multi-purpose space, and it's great that the chairs are here because that enables us to be able to use this room in lots of different ways. So this would be our assembly, our chapel area, and our cafeteria. Most of the classes would take place over in the other building, which Dwayne would be available. Would that be available to open up if people want to see? You could see that space. As far as PE, We're going to pray really hard for good weather because most of that would just have to take place outside for most of the year. The church is currently working to fence in the green space area right out here, so that will be a safe area for the children to play in. There's a gaga pit out there for recess. We're going to have to get creative there. I would say keep in mind we are a startup. We're a first-year school. So we are trying to realistically act our age. I understand we don't have all the bells and whistles to offer your children. But I hope that isn't the priority. I hope you hear our heart and our passion for classical Christian education. And I understand, though, we're asking for partners to grow with us. No, we don't have a gym. But I think we have a space that will function quite well for them. PE will probably just be a once a week class. Jeremy.
I just wanted to say that I think that if you have not had an experience with classical education, you will be so pleasantly surprised when you see the beauty, just the academics. You see all of the different aspects and what your child, your grandchildren, whoever it might be, is getting out of the education. And those other things, not that they're unimportant, but they'll begin to fall in the background when you begin to, I hope, like I did, fall in love with the actual learning that's going on. And you see that beauty unfolding in your own child's life and moving from the classroom into their life. And it's such an impressive thing that those other things, those other questions, while not unimportant, kind of fade to the background. And I hope that your experience is like my own.
Just as an aside, also going back to that grammar stage, those littles are busy, right? Their bodies are constantly moving. So that's also part of how we'll teach. They're not just going to be sitting at their desks, staring at a screen, or certainly not at a screen, at a teacher, at a board. They're going to be up and they're going to be moving around and engaged in their learning because that's how God gave them the ability. That's how God wired them. So it's not a PE class, but there is going to be that gymnastic, that ancient gymnastic education. We're going to use their bodies to help train their minds as well. So yeah, those littles will be up and moving around all day.
I want to comment on the departmentalization. I think because we're small, I envision a lot of collaboration among the teachers, that we're a team.
Absolutely.
Raising up the children and passing on the culture. So we're not, the subjects aren't going to be just separate, they'll be integrated.
Absolutely.
And I think because the faculty is small, we'll be able to do it, and we will all know all the children.
Yes. I think we all need to be careful, and I say this for myself too. Don't despise small things or those small beginnings. There can be such beauty in what God is doing here as a brand new startup. And we probably will look back 20 years from now when we're big and established and long for this, the beginning of it. And so I really want to lean into that beauty. I want to, because we'll have a small faculty to just share life together, and because our class sizes will be small, that can be a beautiful thing. So we're really going to lean into that. Absolutely. Yes.
And I second that, because we were part of a startup 25 years ago, and we had nothing. And those were the best years. And they learned, we sent kids to the best colleges. But it was because the faculty was so passionate and engaged. So God did a lot with our deficiencies.
Yeah, just a side note, so I mentioned my daughter in the beginning of the evening. And so her eighth grade year, her eighth grade year was at Geneva Academy, which is the school I referenced. Karen was a teacher there. So she's 18 years old now. She's graduating. After Geneva closed, we put her in Sussex Tech High School. My wife and I have had lots of discussions about that particular move, if we would do it again, if we would not. It was not positive, I guess, overwhelmingly. It was not positive from a philosophical, ideologue kind of perspective, but I won't get into all of that. But the coolest thing, she was in a part, if you went to Geneva, it was like storage sheds. The classes were storage sheds on property. And if you walked in there, the facilities were clearly not drawing anyone to that school. But my daughter went through 4 years of high school that was, there were some tumultuous times. She's a pastor's kid, which is a challenge in and of itself. Questioning the things she's been taught as she's hearing all these secular ideas. Thank the Lord, we've seen her faith blossom just in the past year, past 6 months actually, as she's comparing stuff she's seeing at school with stuff she's seeing here and in her family. But anyway, I say all that to say that on her wall, she has all these certificates that she's got. She's honor roll, straight A's, kid is super smart. And on her wall, she still has every single certificate she got at Geneva. She never took them down. If she talks about Geneva, it's like, it's very clear that it had a huge impact on her life. She thinks very highly and fondly of all the teachers that were there. I mean, there's something about that experience of that 1 year in that small little school with the teachers, and then also the education she was getting. All of that together had a huge impact on her. And I've often thought about that, like that is not, there was nothing to draw anyone to that school from as far as visibly, but what she experienced in that 1 year has had a significant impact on her life. And so I back that up. It's like it's not about all of the offerings. It's about the relationships. My daughter was in 8th grade. I remember back then you didn't have houses, you had tables. And so her table was Wilberforce table, and she still talks about that. And so she was 8th grade, which I think was kind of like one of the upper grades at that time. And she had all these other kids, younger kids that she kind of helped, and she learned how to, lead these little kids, how to help these little kids at her table. And I even look back on that time and just, it's such a fond memory. And to see her physically, like her eyes light up when she talks about that 1 year of school is pretty special. So anyway, that's just me as a dad sharing my experience with my daughter. So.
No, I can echo that. The Lord blessed us with 3 years at Geneva Academy. So if you're familiar with classical Christian education, there's only one currently classical Christian school in the state of Delaware. And doggone it, it's an hour and 21 minutes away, or I would be there in a heartbeat. When God brought our family to Delaware 7 years ago, we enrolled our kids in Geneva Academy and loved it. And that's really where I cut my teeth on the model, and I read and I learned, and then I got to do, and I saw my kids blossom and thrive. And then God in His providence closed that school, and God and I had conversations. I wrestled. And then, like Dwayne, we tried other schools and it wasn't a fit for us. And so that's when we decided to pull them home, because I had tasted of classical Christian education and I just couldn't not give that to them. And I felt incredibly inadequate to do that myself. But these past 3 years, just trying to be faithful, and then opening up a classical Christian co-op to try to garner more community for my family, all the while praying that God would take up that mantle and continue that legacy. And I remember having conversations with Dwayne. Are you ready? Are you ready? Will you do this? Will you do this? And it was me, not God, until recently. And now it's God, and it's us, and it's you. And I praise Him for giving me the desire of that heart. I'm definitely in this for my own 3 children. I have a 13, a 10, and a 7-year-old. But I want this to outlast just them. I want to leave a legacy for my own 3, for my grandchildren, though I can't wrap my head around that right now. But for the future, I want to leave a legacy for this area and this community. It's desperately needed. And I'm so excited that God has brought us to this point, and it's so exciting to see where He's going to take us. Any other questions? Yep. Measures for security. We have started to talk about that. Obviously, once all of the kids are in the building, all outside doors will be locked. We'll have to have certain protocols in place and drills to practice those things. We'll certainly do our due diligence there. Mm-hmm. Yes, background checks for faculty and staff. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep. We don't, and neither can we promise protection, right? I think we can do our due diligence, but ultimately they're in the Lord's hands. So we want to steward them absolutely and to do our best to protect them, but they're God's, and so we entrust Him more than any safety procedures we might have in place. But yes, absolutely. We'll do our best there. Any other questions? Mm-hmm.
I'm just pivoting off.
Yes, love it.
Having heard you say
Pivot away, yes.
Lord willing, at least 3 times. Which leads me to conclude that perhaps.
No.
What's the minimum number of students for you to say we are starting school?
There's no minimum. There's no minimum. We will start with my 3 and Brooke's 4, and we will start no matter what. God has started this, and we're going to faithfully continue. What it looks like is the Lord willing part, I guess, if that makes sense.
Perfect
Yep.
sense.
God's doing this. We can't stop it. We don't want to. We just want to store it. We want to steward it well. Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Good. Yes.
What would the schedule be as far as the calendar? Would you follow the normal Catholic school calendar, or right now we're 24 weeks with possible conversations, and we're done already?
We would definitely, probably, the question was about the schedule, 36-week minimum, I would envision. So whether that's starting at the end of August and going through the end of May, or starting at the beginning of September and going through the beginning of June, we would follow that schedule, probably 8:30 to 3:30 school day. But again, the flexibility definitely on Fridays, with those being our intentionally restful days. Those would probably be our field trip days, and just a nice restful way to end the week. Does that answer your question? We don't have an actual school calendar set yet, but yes, I would say we'd follow the traditional schedule.
I didn't know if you were mandated by the state. I know with homeschooling, we have to report a certain way. So I didn't know if this is going to be considered private school, so you have to handle it a certain way.
So I was just on the phone with the Department of Education yesterday. In their eyes, for the Department of Education, a private school is exactly the same as a homeschool. We're all considered NPS, or non-public schools. So we simply have to report attendance at the end of the year, which is a blessing. Yes.
Would you mind filling out a little bit more of the concept of partnership? Is that parent volunteer days? Or what would that look like in a practical sense?
The question was parent partnership. What would that look like? I wouldn't want to legislate it too much. I'm not looking to say you have to volunteer a certain number of hours per month or commit X amount of hours. I guess we're looking for heart partners, that whatever your schedule and giftings may enable you to, I would want you to willingly commit that to the school. So if you could come and volunteer in the library, then do that. If you can't, but you could donate money, doing that. If you could coordinate a facilities cleanup team, because we're going to have to set and reset each week. We're just going to need heart partners. We haven't delineated exactly requirements for that. You're going to speak to that?
Partnership, I would also say it's really important that not only are people helping with the practical things, but they really understand the classical model and the vision and what we're trying to do. And so while the kids go home, reinforcing, engaging with their learning, we really want you to partner in that way. And so part of that actually, we've been blessed with some books that we're able to share. Is that right? With people who enroll, so that parents can read and learn more about what is this educational model we're doing, so they can become more full partners with us.
Exactly. Yes, we would look for your partnership and support in the classroom, but outside of that as well at home, spreading the word in the area, just being the cheerleaders and the supporters and the voice for what we're trying to do. And certainly prayer partners. We need everyone uplifting what we're trying to do here before the Lord each and every day.
And I want to add to that, it's not just like you get what Jeremy was saying, it's part of our culture. You're not dropping them off and then you do your thing, we do our thing. We are coming alongside you and saying, we're going to educate your child in a Christ-centered way so that we could reinforce what you're doing at home. And that means there's going to be good communication between teacher and parent. There's going to be prayer that happens. The teacher prays for the student, the parents pray for the teacher, and we're a family. It's a culture. So that's also part of that parent partnership. It's not just in your typical school where parent drops them off, they don't even know who the teacher is, they barely know the teacher, they don't know anything about the teacher. The teacher doesn't know anything about the family, and we're not saying parents and students and teachers all going to go out to dinner every night, but there is a relationship that's unique.
Yes.
And it's going to allow us to better serve and educate the child, and also it's going to help the parent really train up their child the way that they need to train them. So it's
Yes.
a really big picture.
Yes, it is. Ideally, we're all committed to the same things that we're working together to accomplish. In locus parentis is the formal Latin phrase, in the place of the parent. Those teachers are going to love on your kids and invest in them just like you are to raise up this next generation. So, does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
Well, so getting back to curriculum, like I said, I was with Classical Conversations, thanks to Rob. And the curriculum is very easy now. I've got it down pat. I know the website. I know, how it's being taught. I've got a book. I've got a manual that takes me week by week with my child. Is that going to be something where you are meeting with your teachers and you're just pulling this book and pulling this book to do Latin, for example, or math or whatever it is, like you said, Saxon math, which we also use, but when you're pulling from these resources, it's very different than having a manual handed to the parent that says, this is what we're learning in history, this is what we're learning in math. You kind of think, or have you thought about that yet, or is the curriculum what you're going to work on with the teachers once they're all on board? In other words, Classical Conversations is a program.
Yes, this is not a program in the sense that it's a big box like the examples I would be familiar with is Bob Jones curriculum or a Becca curriculum where you just kind of buy the box and they cover all of your subjects for you. It's not going to be that way at all because I think that's unnecessarily limiting. I want the best Latin curriculum that we can come up with. And if that comes from a different publisher than the best math curriculum, I'm okay with that. I would say while we want parents to be invested and committed, that doesn't mean you have to homeschool your children and send them to Legacy Academy. Ideally, the teachers are doing most of that content. And then because of the communication, you're just supporting at home. I don't think you would have to go back and teach another lesson per se. Does that answer your question? We are envisioning, at Geneva, we had an assembly book where the kids had to write their assignments, especially if they're going from teacher to teacher. That communication is very important. So they'll absolutely be writing down which book and which page they're responsible for each class. Yep.
And to add to that, we are looking at curriculum maps. So
Yes.
we do have a plan.
Yes.
It's not like we're going to randomly grab things. There is
Absolutely.
a full, very comprehensive map that we're looking at. But is it going to be this publisher, that publisher? That has not been decided. But we do know this is what we're teaching in these grades, and this is what we're doing. It's not just like
Absolutely. I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't clear. The content has definitely been determined. We know exactly. So for first grade history, they need an ancient foundation so that by the time they get to third grade history, they can build Middle Ages. And the content is there. Again, the curriculum is just a map. It's a resource that we're using to accomplish that purpose.
I think I'm just more interested in being involved in having, like, not dropping them off and letting them, and then not understanding, what did you learn today? Oh, you learned about, the Greeks. Okay, well, what about the Greeks? Like,
Absolutely.
if it's posted online
Yes.
or something.
It will be. So this management software that we're working to wrap our brains around right now, absolutely. The teachers will be posting lesson plans there. The kids will be coming home with a binder and things written in there. I think anytime you walk into the school, you would see, hopefully your child is eagerly sharing what they've learned throughout the day. Definitely. That falls under the partnership component, I think.
We've gone from public to homeschool. It's like, I don't want to go back, but I also know the need, and so I'm kind of caught right now in between, how much do I want to hand off? Because right now, I got the ball. And
Yep.
my kids are excelling, and I'm worried about that now. I need to go back to work, but at the same time, now I'm going to entrust, that's tough when you know you can do it. That's the tough part.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm asking this.
Sure. No, I appreciate the questions. And again, is this a fit for everyone? I don't know. And I'm not trying, if you feel firmly called by God to homeschool your children, I'm not looking to replace that in any way. Perhaps then that homeschool hybrid Friday option would be a nice introduction. You could meet our faculty and get an idea of what we're teaching and how and why, while still doing most of it at home yourself. That was our heart for offering that Friday. But yes, we're not looking to replace parents, but we are looking to partner with them. Okay. Good. Any other questions or comments? I see the food sitting out, so. There are snacks as a reward.
I just make comments.
Please, make all the comments. This is Kim Henry.
Well, I'm an educator, and I've been everywhere. Been public, private, Christian, college, classical conversations, homeschool, through Challenge, Challenge A and B. And I have had the privilege of working with Karen and her husband with these co-op that they've done this year. And so I just want to let you know that's an awesome woman standing up there. And she is humble, she is spirit-led, she is wants to honor God in all she does, but she is like amazing, and she's got this. She's got it all figured out.
God's got this.
As much as humanly possible, I think she has kind of marked off a lot of things. She is on her own a workhorse. Very diligent, and so I think I just wanted to say how, and I've seen her in a lot of different settings. Just things that come up when you're in a homeschool co-op, and she just always handles it with grace and handles it beautifully. So I just wanted to say that.
Well, I didn't know that's what you were going to say, but thank you. I hope you hear my heart. I am very, very, very passionate about this. I love it. I have seen it. I've tasted of it. And I want to share it. This area needs this. Our churches need it. Our families need it. And so if I have to be willing to lead it to accomplish that purpose, then I want God to use me however, whatever his plan is, I'm willing to do that. So I'm excited. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for prayerfully considering partnering with us, whatever that looks like. Enrolling your kids, teaching, donating, volunteering. We need it all. We need God's people to accomplish his purposes and his work. So thank you for being here.